From the Delta Sky Club
Welcome back, Miss Klein.
to the Jet Bridge, Delta Airlines relies on 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to power operations and serve customers faster. Together, we're putting 5G into the hands of ground staff so they can better assist on-the-go travelers with real-time information throughout the airport. This is elevating customer experience. This is Delta Airlines with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
This is Doug Gottlieb from All Ball with Doug Gottlieb. Listen, I'm going to get serious for a minute and talk about something personal. The hate in our country is getting out of control. In fact, it's at an all-time high, and people are facing just too much hate. A lot of people don't think it's a problem. I can tell you I've experienced it firsthand. Living outside of the country in Russia, when my teammates found out I was Jewish, and at the time, granted this is 25 years ago, I couldn't get into the country of Dubai, they just treated me differently. I knew what they were saying in Russian because I could speak it, but they didn't know I understood that they were talking behind my back. Look, there's lots of examples of it, but it's going to take all of us to stop this sort of hate because we're all on the same team in this country. So let's take a break from our hate so our team can regroup and regain our momentum. We need to take a timeout against hate. Visit standuptoallhate.org to help. And join me in calling for timeout against hate by following the @WhatsUpWithHate or posting the blue square emoji. Standuptoallhate.org. That's the place to go if you want to help.
It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant pride.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. Have some fun.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our final Big Blue Kickoff Live of the week, the Wednesday edition, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. John Schmeelk, Matthew Citak with you. The phone numbers, and we'll be taking your call all show, is 201-939-4513. All right, Mr. Citak, so we are at the point now where we're going to do our little game preview. Some news, Jermaine Illuminor and Armand Watt has been ruled out of this game for the New York Football Giants, and we'll have to wait and see about who the Giants starting quarterback is.
Yes, so as we know, Tommy DeVito popped up on the injury report yesterday with right forearm, soreness or injured right forearm.
And he also said, I'm, quote, sore everywhere, is what he said yesterday.
He said, pretty much he said everywhere hurts yesterday, but, it was the first time he really took a full game worth of hits in about 11 months. So the fact that his body was a little achy, that doesn't surprise me. But so he was listed as limited yesterday with the right forearm injury. And today he was projected as a DNP, did not participate in today's practice. Now, all of the practices this week were walkthrough. So on the injury report, those are all projections of what it would be if they did have actual practice. So he was a DNP today. DeVito is listed as questionable on the final injury report. And PR let us know that he is not flying with the team either. He is meeting the team, likely meeting the team in Dallas later. I guess he's going through some more testing here.
Just making sure everything's structurally good, I would imagine.
Yes, he's still listed as questionable, so his status has not changed, at least as of now.
Yep.
But it's looking at least like a possibility that Drew Lock could be the quarterback for tomorrow's game.
No question about it. So we'll see. It could be Drew Lock. And you know what? That's why Drew Lock had to be ready. And we knew that there would be a chance that Drew Lock could go back in at some point this year, whether because of injury or because of performance. Like, it's not like Drew Lock was being shut down or anything like that. So he'll be ready to go. And that I think could alter the offense a little bit, Matt. As we talked about going from Daniel to Tommy and whether or not that would alter how the Giants ran their offense. Neither one of us thought so because Tommy DeVito's mobile like Daniel Jones is. He can run it. He can do all of that sorts of stuff. And I still agree with that. Drew Lock, on the other hand, not as mobile as those two guys. So it'll be much, he can move the pocket, roll out, things like that, but the read option game will get taken out of the mix probably. Much more of a pocket-oriented pass game if Drew Lock ends up being the quarterback.
Yeah, and, we've barely seen Drew Lock pretty much since he became a Giant because he got injured in the first preseason game, missed the rest of the preseason, and has only gotten in for, a handful of snaps as a reserve this year. He came in, I believe it was the Eagles game. He came in for a couple of snaps towards the end of the game.
I think 2 series.
2 series, and in Sunday's game, he came in for 1 play, completed a 3-yard pass. So we haven't really seen him.
Beautiful throw.
Which Drew Lock said in the locker room yesterday, that was the first time in his career that he ever went into the game for 1 play.
That makes sense. It isn't a common occurrence. So
Yeah,
I get
and
it.
Last year with Seattle, I think was the first time he really was a primarily backup quarterback. And I guess, that situation never came up with the Seahawks last year. And he jokingly said that if he had known that he was only going to be in there for 1 play,
He would have let it fly.
maybe he would have chucked it downfield and tried for, a 30, 40-yard pass. Jokingly, he said that.
And by the way, it was a smart play because they did like an all-out blitz on that, and he had to get the ball out quick, and that was the hot on that play, so it made sense.
Yeah, it did. But yeah, Drew Lock is definitely not what you'd consider a primarily like dual threat quarterback. He's capable of scrambling just like many quarterbacks are, but he's not the one that they're gonna, as you just mentioned, probably not gonna run that many or any RPOs with Drew Lock under center. But he did start 2 games for the Seahawks last year, and he looked pretty good in those two starts. First up against the 49ers, and this game was in San Francisco. He completed just under 71% of his passes for 269 yards, 2 touchdowns with 2 interceptions, for a 92.0 passer rating. And then the game that I feel like all of us remember, and probably what got him the backup job for the Giants this year, was that performance against the Eagles on Monday Night Football, where he led the Seahawks down pretty much towards the very end of the 4th quarter, game-winning touchdown drive to beat the Eagles. And in that game, he completed 2/3 of his passes for 208 yards and the 1 touchdown with no interceptions. 94.0 passer rating. So in his 2 starts last year, he was very accurate. I mean, the lowest of his completion percentages in those 2 games, 66.67%. That's pretty good. And then the other game, just about 71%. Over 200 yards in both games. I mean, as we've seen, throughout his career, Drew Lock is not afraid to, sling it. He's not afraid just to go for it.
And with Jermaine Illuminor out, I would imagine it's going to be Chris Hubbard at left tackle and Evan Neal at right tackle. By the way, if you want to check it out, I did about 12, 13-minute interview with Evan Neal. It's up in the Giants Huddle podcast feed right now. It's podcast only, so don't go to the app. Don't go to YouTube. You got to get it on your favorite podcast platform. Go there and subscribe. I know maybe some of you guys aren't on the podcast thing yet. If you have an Apple phone, it's easy to do Apple Podcast. If you're on Android, you can do Pandora. You can do Spotify. Good Pods is a new one.
Actually, do YouTube podcasts.
Yeah, you also do YouTube podcasts if you want. Excellent point, Pearson, because that kind of took over for Google Podcasts when that disappeared earlier this year. So a lot of different places to get it. Really good interview with Evan Neal talking about him going back into the starting lineup. So go check that out. But again, you're going against a Cowboys defense that has really struggled this year, Matt. They're in the bottom quarter, but not even quarter, bottom 5th of the league in terms of most of the defensive metrics. They've struggled to stop the run. Their tackling has been poor. They've given up a bunch of big plays over the course of the year. But they seemed to figure out a little bit something last week against the Commanders. And this is why I think getting ready for this game is tough. Do we talk about the Cowboys in terms of how they played in their first 10 games this year? Or do they talk about the Cowboys in terms of how they played in their 11th game this year? Because it looked like a very different team that I know it was a 1-score game, but they really did outplay the Commanders for most of that game last week. Which Cowboy team is going to show up? Did they actually turn a corner last week? Was it just a bad day for the Commanders and the Cowboys took advantage of it? That's what I'm having trouble figuring out. Because you look at the season-long numbers, offense, defense, turnovers, whatever we're going to look at. The Cowboys are bad. They're not a good football team, but they played really good last week against the Commanders. So what team's going to show up this week?
Yeah, I'll say I don't think that it's fair or that we should look at the entire season worth of stats on the Cowboys defense, because let's not forget, in the first game that the Giants and Cowboys played, which was all the way back in week 4, the Cowboys lost both Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence in that game.
And now, DeMarcus Lawrence is not back yet.
Lawrence is still on injured reserve. He's not back. Micah Parsons, though, has returned. He's been back. This Sunday was his 3rd game back against the Commanders. 3 games. In those 3 games, I just want to say, 4 sacks for Parsons.
No, he's been good.
2 different games with 2 sacks in it.
Including last week, he had 2 against the Commanders.
Yes, he had 2 against the Commanders. And in addition to Micah Parsons, but last week against the Commanders was the first game that they got Deron Bland back, who was...
Now, they lost Trayvon Diggs in the game, but they did have Deron Bland.
They did, and we don't know yet if Diggs is going to be able to play tomorrow. He
might be able to,
He was limited on Monday, then didn't participate in practice on Tuesday. It's going to be another few hours before we get Wednesday's injury report for the Cowboys, so that one will definitely be one to look at. Yep. But if Diggs is able to come back, then all of a sudden they have their 2, Pro Bowl starting corners back in the lineup, which they haven't had for a full game at any point this season so far.
Now, Diggs has not been the same this year coming off that ACL. He has not been the dominant player he has been in years past, which usually it takes a year, especially for corners, to come back all the way from an injury like that. So
yes, but one thing you mentioned was the takeaways. Well, in the 3 games that Micah Parsons been back, they've had 6 takeaways. And let me see, 2, 3. In their first 8 games, they had 6 total takeaways. And now in their last 3 with Parsons back, they have equaled that number with 6 takeaways.
Yeah, and despite those 6 takeaways, by the way, Cowboys still 3rd worst team in the league in terms of turnover ratio at -9. So they're one of the teams that have had a worse year than the Giants in terms of winning that turnover battle.
That the first game of that 3-game stretch was the Eagles game, where they had 2 takeaways, but the offense turned it over 5 times.
They've had 2 5-turnover games this year, one against the Eagles, one against the Lions.
Yeah, not great.
No.
But, so yeah, that's why I think I'm not going to say that the defense that we saw from the Cowboys last week is exactly what the Giants are going to get tomorrow, but I lean a little bit more towards last week's unit than what we saw in the first 10 weeks, because you can't underscore, I have to emphasize how big of an impact Deron Bland has in that secondary. I mean, he's an all-pro, Pro Bowl cornerback. He really makes a huge difference for that secondary. So even if, whether or not Diggs is in the lineup, even if he is, as you mentioned, he's really not playing up to the level that we've seen in years past from him. Deron Bland returning is a huge boost to the Dallas defense.
And now people will say, well, why do you just want the Cowboys defense playing? Well, they gave up 400 yards. Jaden Daniels, look at his stats. He had a great number. He had a great line, 25 of 38, 275. Well, 86 of those yards came on a deep touchdown at the end of the game. So
20 seconds left.
Correct. So other than that, it's under 200 yards. Other than the Jaden Daniels 7 for 74 rushing performance, otherwise the Commanders just had 18 rushes for 70 yards in that game. So they did a pretty good job against the run, which has been a problem too. We all kind of expected that it would take that team a little bit to go from Dan Quinn to Mike Zimmer's defense. They're both 4-3s, but Dan Quinn's defense is a little bit less sound. Guys kind of running around, blitzing, twist stunts, and, more risk-taking, I think. And Zimmer's more of a sound defensive thing. You got all those double mug looks where you fake the blitz, you drop back, and things like that. And it was going to take him some time, I think, to get used to Zimmer's defense, and I do think we're seeing some progress that way. But I will say this. The Cowboys' personnel up front in terms of their defensive tackles and such, it's not the best. They don't have great, big run-stopping defensive tackles. Mozzie Smith's as a first-round pick has been nothing short of a disaster so far. It has not worked out, which is funny. At the time, when they made that pick, we're all like, do you want to pick a run-stopping defensive tackle there? It's a safe pick, but is it a pick that has a lot of upside? And it turns out it's not a safe pick because it hasn't worked out. Not sure why. He was such a good run stopper in Michigan. It just hasn't worked in the NFL. I don't have a good answer for it. But it hasn't worked out, which is why when we get to the draft, folks, there's no such thing as a safe pick. Even the guys you think are safe players might not work out. I still think you can run on this team. And if Bland and Diggs are both out there, and Jordan Lewis is a good slot corner too, he's been in the league for a long time. He's a good player. This, to me, is the Tyrone Tracy game. You run the ball against this team. You pound it. You run play action off of that. And that's how you move the ball up and down the field. This is not a 45 pass game to me, Citak. Especially, and we'll get to this on offense. They have Cooper Rush as a starting quarterback. Solid backup, but he's not going to be a big play merchant where you get big flashy plays. The Cowboys, I think, only have one run of 20 or more yards all year. They don't get big plays through the run game either. So they're not going to run up the scoreboard on you if you protect the football, right? So run the ball, run it successfully. You should be able to against this defense, even with Illuminor not in the game. Run behind Evan Neal and Greg Van Roten on the right side. You got two big guys on that side. Run behind them. That's how I think I would approach this offense against the Cowboys defense. Don't let Micah Parsons get in those 3rd and longs where he can, pin back his ears and rush the passer against Evan Neal or Chris Hubbard. It ain't going to go well if that's what you run into in this game. Run it well, and if you can't run it, then you're going to be in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, well, first, just a quick note. If you were just to look at the score of the Cowboys game last week, you'd see, 34 points. Like, wow, that must have been a great offensive performance. The offense did, play pretty well against a Commanders defense that I feel like has gotten better throughout the season.
Yeah, around 330 yards of offense. But.
Yeah, however, of those 34 points, 14 of them came on touchdowns scored by the special teams. They had Kavontae Turpin had a kickoff return for a touchdown.
Who's awesome, by the way. Look out for him on specials.
Yeah, he's potentially the best returner in the NFL.
Correct.
And then after that, Terry McLaurin 86-yard touchdown when their kicker then missed the extra point. They were down 1. They tried kicking an onside kick, and the Cowboys returned that one for a touchdown.
Which, by the way, the guy should have slid down because then the Commanders got the ball back. But yes,
should have, but
Wanya Thomas.
So, yeah, that's 20 points now that were scored by the offense, not 34. So, not the worst performance, but not quite as promising as, just the final score might say. I do agree with you that I feel like the best game plan for the Giants tomorrow would be to establish the run early and often. However, I am not going to go so far as to make any sort of prediction on how the Giants will do in the run game because I did that before the Week 4 game, saying I don't see how Devin Singletary does not have a big game, and the Giants finished with how many rush yards that game?
It was the Cowboys' best defensive performance against the run.
26 total rush yards in that game.
It was like 2 yards a carry or something ridiculous
I am not going to be making any proclamations on how the running game should do, but I do think that the Giants will try to establish the run, regardless of who's under center, whether it's DeVito or Locke. They will try to establish the run, and as you said, avoid those third and long situations. Because when you're already down your 2 starting tackles, Andrew Thomas and Jermaine Illuminor, despite Evan Neal, showing some promise these last 2 games that he started, it's clearly a step down from Andrew Thomas and Jermaine Illuminor to Chris Hubbard and Evan Neal. There's a reason why those 2 were backups and not originally starters. So, yeah, use the run game to help avoid those second and long, third and long passing situations because the last thing you want is Micah Parsons pinning his ears back and just gunning for the quarterback because that may not end well.
Looking for the best way to win huge prizes during one of the best NFL weeks of the year? Look no further than DraftKings, the official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. This Thanksgiving, you can play free for a $1 million top prize. That's right. Any customer, new or existing, can play free for the $1 million top prize with their next $5 deposit. Make it a really happy Thanksgiving with DraftKings. All customers download the DraftKings app and use code DK1. That's code DK1 to play free for a shot at the $1 million top prize. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY at 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. Minimum $5 deposit required. Reward issued as $5 ticket for November 28 Fantasy Football Millionaire Contest. See DraftKings.com/DFS for details.
Offensively for the Cowboys, Rico Dowdle is taking over as their primary back. They're really giving very few carries to Ezekiel Elliott. I don't frankly know why it took them so long to do that. He was not running effectively early in the year. They tried Dalvin Cook for a little bit. They gave up on that very quickly. And Dowdle's been okay. He's not a big play guy, but he will get you 4 yards a carry and be a solid back for you. Their offensive line is a little bit banged up. It does not look like Zach Martin's going to play in this game. When I talked to Mickey Spagnola, that's also on that Giants Huddle podcast, if you guys want to check it out, he said Zach Martin probably not in this game, Jake Ferguson probably not in this game. But a chance at Bland coming back, a chance that Tyler Smith comes back so they could plug him in at left guard. You still have a left tackle in Tyler Guyton, who's a rookie. They'll have Bass at right guard, who was a practice squad backup for them last year. You have a rookie, Cooper Beebe, at center, and then you have Terrence Steele at right tackle, who has not had a very good year. So the Cowboy offensive line is not the Cowboy offensive line of old where, Dexter Lawrence, and they did a good job against the Giants in Week 4. They double-teamed and triple-teamed Dexter Lawrence a lot in that game. But if you can get Brian Burns and Thibodeau and Ojulari one-on-one against those offensive tackles, I think you're going to be in some pretty good shape.
Well, there will not be Ojulari because he was placed
on
injured
You're
reserve.
Right.
But
Correct.
Kayvon Thibodeau obviously returned to the lineup this past Sunday. So it'll be Dexter, Brian Burns, and Kayvon leading the pass rush, which the last game against the Cowboys, the one player that was able to get a sack on Dak Prescott was Kayvon Thibodeau. So hopefully he can mimic that again and, get his first sack since returning from injured reserve. The Giants have only gotten one sack total in their last 3 games. After leading the league in sacks for most of the season, pretty much the entire first half of the season, the unit has slowed down considerably the last 3 weeks with just one. They haven't been getting much, even just pressure on the quarterback. I mean, you look at their just total pressure numbers, they've been in like single digits the last couple of weeks too.
Well, when you can't stop the run and you can't force the other team to pass and do straight dropbacks, and they can run screens, they can run RPOs, they can run quick game, it's harder to get pressure. And until you stop the run and you force teams to play from behind, whether it's the score or the sticks, it's going to be harder to get pressure. Teams have figured that out now. We don't have to send our guy back in a traditional 5 or 7 step drop with no play action. Why? We're either winning or running the ball well. So that's where it starts. Get a lead, turn teams one-dimensional, then maybe that pass rush can wake up again.
Yeah, hopefully.
CeeDee Lamb's obviously still really good.
Oh, yeah.
Leads the league in receptions, but his yards per reception is way down from what it usually is. So something to keep in mind. They'll run at least 1 or 2 end arounds for him. They'll run, I've seen them run shovel passes for him, screens, just quick throws outside, bubble screens. They'll try to get the ball in his hands, let him make some plays. But again, with Cooper Rush at quarterback, you just haven't seen those plays down the field. Brandon Cooks, good chance he's going to be back in this game. The veteran, he had an infection in his knee. Missed, I think, 5 or 6 games, I think. But he should be – there's a good chance he's back this week. He was questionable for last week's game, did not play. So I think there's a chance he'll be back. But this is, again, not the same set of Cowboys weapons that they've had in the past. So Brandon Cooks has had the Giants' number a little bit over the last couple of years. He's had some big plays against them.
Yeah, he has. And, CeeDee Lamb is still one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. His production the last 3 games with Cooper Rush under center is definitely taking a little bit of a hit. I mean, he did have the one game against the Texans 2 weeks ago where he caught 8 for 93. That, those are pretty common CD numbers. But the other 2 games in Cooper Rush's first start, 6 receptions for 21 yards. That was crazy to see, 6 for 21. And then last week against Washington, 10 for 67. So, yeah, as you said, they're not really taking downfield shots, at least not to CeeDee Lamb. I mean, Cooper Rush, I feel like, has taken not like deep shots, but has thrown it somewhat down the field, but just not really to CeeDee Lamb.
No, Cooper Rush is a good, solid backup, but they're going to play a more conservative game plan with Cooper Rush at quarterback. It's just the way they run.
Yeah, definitely. And the tight end that has been filled in for Jake Ferguson last week, Luke Schoonmaker, he actually looked pretty good last week too. Well, the last 2 weeks.
He was a second-round pick, so they need him to do something.
Yeah, in the game that Ferguson suffered the concussion, which was that Houston game 2 weeks ago, he left pretty early in that game. Schoonmaker caught 6 for 56, and then last week, 3 for 55 and a touchdown. So, just because he's the backup doesn't mean that he can be overlooked at all. Like, he is a very solid tight end, and, he's a good pass catcher. And the Giants are going to have to pay close attention to him. Cooper Rush seems to like to target his tight end. So whether, if Ferguson somehow is able to clear the protocol, which seems unlikely considering he has not practiced in any capacity yet, and the game is tomorrow. And as we've seen, you don't typically go from DNP to fully cleared in the concussion protocol. There are steps you need to take. But yeah, Schoonmaker is still a good pass-catching tight end, and I feel like him and CeeDee Lamb will probably be the 2 top targets for Cooper Rush tomorrow, if I had to guess. I mean, Jalen Tolbert's gotten, some looks. If Brandon Cooks comes back, I'm sure he'll get some targets as well, but the Giants have played well against the tight end this year. They're going to have to keep it up against Schoonmaker, and hopefully they can limit CeeDee Lamb a little bit more in this game than they did in the first game between these 2 teams, because in the first game, CeeDee Lamb caught 7 for 98 and a touchdown.
The one big one down the field against Banks. So
yeah, I was going to say he had a lot of success against Deonte Banks in that game, who Deonte Banks, by the way, is listed as questionable for tomorrow. We don't know for sure if he's going to play or not. Obviously, hopefully he will be in the lineup because he's still the starting quarterback and one of the better corners on this team. So yeah, they're going to have to pay close attention to CeeDee Lamb and Luke Schoonmaker tomorrow.
Yeah, just to give you the rest of the guys on the injury report, I think we probably hit all of them, but just in case we haven't. So Illuminor, Ojulari got placed on IR. Armon Watts, all three of them are out for this game. They're not going to play. Tay Banks with a rib injury, he's questionable, and Tommy DeVito with that right forearm is questionable as well. And I guess we'll probably, if he doesn't travel today, I don't know if they'll release that. I imagine usually they do if a player doesn't travel, if whether or not he's going to play. But my guess is that this is going to be one of those workout before the game deals, see how the arm feels, and keep the Cowboys guessing a little bit at who's going to be behind center. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yep.
All right, 201-939-4513, 201-939-4513. Guys, don't forget, go download the Giants official connected TV streaming app, Giants TV. It brings official and original video content and game highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV is free on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and the Giants mobile app. All right, let's get to the calls at 201-939-4513. Again, this is our final show of this week. We're not doing a show on Friday. We will be back on Monday. Let's go to Scott in New Mexico. He will lead us off today. Hey, Scott.
Hey, guys. First of all, happy Thanksgiving to both of you.
You too.
Happy Thanksgiving.
And I wanted to say something I haven't said before in regards to you two and Pearson. One of the things that impresses me when I watch the show with you three is that you're professionals. And I don't think there's any higher compliment to offer somebody to say that they do their job as professionals. And I just wanted to say that in the spirit of
I appreciate that. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
In regards to, I'm going to ask some general question, then I have a specific question. I know you went through this sort of, I wouldn't call it a diatribe, but just basically a discussion about the Dallas and the New York Giants. To me, here's what's lacking with both teams. They're not professional. And as I watched the game, and I saw how Schmitz was tossed around by Vita Vea, how I saw Irving run up the middle, right down Dexter Lawrence lane, so to speak, for a touchdown, I realized that the Giants have a multiplicity of problems. It's obvious to everybody, Giant fans, outsiders, etc. But that's not my general qualm with them.
They have a what problem, Scott? I'm sorry, your phone cut out a little bit. They have a what problem?
Okay. Well, first of all, the way Michael Schmitz played and how Vita Vea tossed him around like a rag doll. And then secondarily, I was talking about Irving running right up the middle.
Oh, I got you. Okay, yeah. I heard that part. Okay, I got you. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So as I look at the Giants, there's so many different things that are wrong. Did we overvalue some of the players like a Ty Banks because he hasn't played well? Malik Neighbors, I'm not even sure he's going to be on the team in 2 years because he's a malcontent.
I think that's a little premature, Scott. I think that's a little premature. I see where you're coming from, but I think that's a little premature.
Yeah, and the reason I say it, John, is he sort of reminds me a little bit of Kadarius Toney, and I'm not sure. You need a culture in anything you do, and I don't know if the Giants have that culture yet.
Well, a huge difference, though, Scott, between him and Kadarius Toney is that A, the production, B, he's on the field because he's healthy, and just as a smart player, being able to, the craft of playing wide receiver, he's much further along than Toney ever was.
Right. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Matt, because you had lambasted the backup tackle because Tristan Wirfs wasn't playing. I was wondering if you had the stats on how he performed in that game. Because I was just curious. There's a point I wanted to make
Bucks
about it.
School, probably. He's talking about school, the backup for Wirfs. I can look that up real quick. I got you.
So maybe you can let me know how he performed, whether he gave up sacks, pressures, etc.
Yeah, and again, I think too when you look at these stats for the individual game, the Bucks did a good job of getting that ball out pretty quick. So in that game, Justin School, 35 pass snaps. I have him down for just one pressure, and he got beaten twice without that resulting in pressure on the quarterback. So he did a nice job out there.
He did a nice job. All right. And so you win and lose on the field as much as you reflect on stats, and it's a zero-sum game, as you both know. So I have two questions that I want to ask, and I'll be glad to get off the phone and listen to your answers. I had a discussion with one of them is going to be controversial. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to. But the first question I wanted to ask is in regards to the quarterback, because the quarterback is the central player. Do you think the Giants need the bridge quarterback, or do you think they might go on a limb and take somebody like Cam Ward? I think on Dane Brugler's list was 12?
16th, I believe.
Sure.
I believe he was 16th,
okay.
yeah.
And Shador Sanders, I think, was right next to him.
He was 22, and Milroe was 23, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Okay. So, in your opinion, here's one question. Do you think the Giants are going to reach for a quarterback, because he's a central character in any football team? And my second question is rather controversial, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to.
Okay.
I was talking to I talked to Madeline and Sean last week, and I was comparing the stability of a Pittsburgh Steelers team that always shows a competitive edge. And they recounted that they haven't had a losing season, I think, in 20 years. They weren't below 500 in the 20 years with Cowher and Tomlin at quarterback, as head coach. Here's the question I want to ask, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. Do you think the team would be 2-9 if Mike Tomlin was the coach of the New York Giants? And again, those are the only two questions I really have. And again, thank you. And again, I wish you a very happy and Merry Thanksgiving for both of you.
Thank you, Scott. Look,
Scott.
I have a lot of respect for what Mike Tomlin has done in terms of a head coach and developing a culture there and building a roster in his image. That's why I think it's impossible to say if you drop him in with a parachute at the start of this year and just let him coach this team, I think you lose the Tomlin impact, right? I think the whole point of having Mike Tomlin is that you build a team in conjunction with the general manager. Now, their old general manager recently retired. They recently hired his replacement. But they've been building the team in Pittsburgh almost the same way going back to when Bill Cowher was there, right? They're built the same way. They have the same play style, and they've established that. They know exactly how they're going to build. They have their leader in place. Mike Tomlin's the head coach. He's really the leader of that organization. At least that's how I would frame it, based on what I know from the outside looking in. And when you have that figure in place, you can build that way. The Giants have been searching for that man to be the leader of the organization since Tom Coughlin and Jerry Reese were let go, right? They've been cycling through general managers and head coaches to try to find those guys. They hope that Joe Shane and Brian Daboll are those guys. And in 8 or 9 years, you're going to have an organization built in their image, that you've built up credibility, you've built up your play style, what your culture wants to be, and then you are where you are. The Giants have not had a chance to do that the way the Steelers have had because of their lack of continuity. Now, there's a lack of continuity not by choice. It's because the results have been so bad. You haven't been able to stick with these guys for more than a couple of years. That's the trick, right? And that's why John Mara doesn't want to keep making these changes and keep making these moves, because you understand the Giants want to be like the Steelers. They want to have a guy in place like they had Tom Coughlin in place for more than 10 years and say, all right, here's our guy. This is how we want to play. This is how we build the team. Let's roll. They're trying to establish that with Joe Shane and Brian Daboll. Obviously, the results haven't been what they wanted so far.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's not just the Giants that, want that. That is every team across the NFL that would love to have a situation like that where for 20 years you have just complete continuity and consistency. I mean, that's like the dream, That's sort of like the Green Bay Packers quarterback situation. I mean, they've had, 3 quarterbacks in the last 30 years? Most teams love situations like that.
Someone had a great line for me. Since 1970, there's been more popes than there's been Steelers head coaches.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. It is incredibly rare, which is why, we praise the Pittsburgh Steelers for the situation, because there's no other organization around the NFL that has a situation like that. None. But yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it on the head there. I don't really have much to add on that one. What
was the first part for this first half?
The other one was about potentially reaching for a quarterback in the draft. What I'll say about that is, Dane Brugler is one of the best in the business at what he does. At the same time, just because I think he, has prospects in a certain ranking that doesn't mean it's, it's gospel that like those are the final rankings that every team follows.
And he always makes a point that there's no consensus on quarterbacks. They're all over the place, and it's different on every team's board.
100%. And not only that, but as we all know, quarterback is the most important position in all of sports. In all of sports, all professional sports, that is the most important position. So I don't personally believe that there is a thing as reaching for a quarterback. If you are convinced that a quarterback in the draft is a guy that can, take you to where your organization wants to go and be there, be your franchise guy for potentially the next decade, there's no possible reach that you can do. There's no too soon to pick that guy. If you have conviction on a guy, you go and take him regardless of where you are picking. Now, we have no idea how the Giants front office feels about the current crop of quarterbacks. I mean, we see the same reports that you guys do about, potential the Giants front office members at various college games throughout the season or at practices or whatever. We see the same reports, but at this point, that's basically the same knowledge that we have.
Even if you don't like a guy, you still might go to their game at their practice.
Yeah. So,
right?
Especially in this draft, obviously right now, the Giants, depending on where you look, currently have either the number 1 or the number 2 pick. And given...
Long way to go, though.
A long way to go. But given the Giants' current quarterback situation, should not surprise anyone that they have been and going to continue to spend a lot of time looking at these projected top quarterbacks to see if one of these guys could be their guy. And if they feel like one of these guys, whether it's Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jalen Milroe, someone else, if it's one of those guys, then 100% you go and take him with the first, second, third, or wherever you end up. Without a doubt, you do it, and you don't think twice about it.
Okay, let me go 3 different things, because I thought you made some really good points. One, even though Dane Brugler has like Cam Ward as his 16th best player, he said on draft season, and check it out, it's the most recent draft season still up there. We talked to Dane Brugler about his top 50, so go find that on your favorite podcast platform and Giants.com, Giants app. He's going to do a mock draft in a couple weeks. Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders might be the first guy picked in his mock draft, even though they're the 16th or 23rd overall player on his board. It's 2 different exercises because teams value quarterbacks. They got to pick them early, right? That's how it goes. I will slightly disagree with you that there is a way to reach on a quarterback. You're right. If a team has conviction on a player and you pick him early, that's not a reach because you believe in him. The problem is when you get to a team and they have the quarterback as their 12th best player on the board and they feel okay about him, but they pick him 2nd overall anyway because they need a quarterback.
Oh, yeah, that's
a reach.
That's a different
situation. So you
situation.
can still reach on a quarterback if you don't do your process.
I
correct.
did preface by saying only if you have conviction. I just want to make that clear to
I know you did. I know you did, which is why I brought that part up first. 100% correct. So that's how I look at that. And I'll just bring up this. I think you brought this up last week. The Giants could have easily picked a quarterback in this year's draft if they wanted to. They had J.J. McCarthy staring them in the face. They had Michael Penix staring them in the face. They had Bo Nix staring them in the face. But they stuck to their board and they picked Malik Neighbors because they thought he was a special player and the quarterbacks that available weren't. Now, I'm putting words in their mouths that the quarterbacks that were available weren't. But guess what? If they thought they were special, I'm guessing they probably would have picked one of them. So I'm doing a little inferencing there and assuming, which I think that makes sense logically in this situation. So, no, but you can sign a bridge guy and draft somebody. Look what the Patriots did with Jacoby Brissett and Drake May, for example. Maybe you don't love one of these quarterbacks in the first round. Maybe you want to try to get Jalen Milroe. You have to trade back into the end of the first round to draft him. Or maybe you like Jackson Dart and as a 3rd or 4th rounder. You pick him there. You pick a bridge quarterback. And you know what? If you get through a year and you're not convinced Dart's the guy, go pick another one next year. That's fine. At this point in the process, when you're trying to get your future quarterback, you're literally throwing every resource you can. And if you go in one year, it doesn't work, pick one the next. That doesn't work, pick one the next. Don't double down on what's a mistake. You know what I mean? So that's how I kind of look at it, and we'll see how the Giants approach it. We should bring up, by the way, that I don't think it's official yet, but all the reports are that Daniel Jones is signing on the Vikings practice squad. Good for him. It was one of the spots that we talked about. We thought would be a good fit. Get in that McVay tree, right? Get in that Shanahan-McVay tree. Maybe he does a great job for the Vikings this year. Maybe he never even sees the field. But guess what? When he hits the offseason next year and let's say the Rams are looking for a backup for Matthew Stafford, and Matthew Stafford might retire. You don't think Sean McVay's getting on the phone with Kevin O'Connell and asking him what was it like to work with Daniel Jones? Get with that group, learn the offense, settle your career back down a little bit. I think it's a great fit for him there.
Yeah, me too. I mean, going back to leading into the season opener against the Vikings, we both raved about how good of a coach Kevin O'Connell is.
Yep.
I mean, of all the potential destinations for Daniel Jones, I feel like this was right up there among the very best that he could possibly land in, because that is a coach that will sort of help him get things back on track. I mean, we don't know, I guess, what Daniel Jones' ceiling really is at this point of his career, but if there is one guy that can get the most out of him now, it's Kevin O'Connell. I mean, we've seen it this year with Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was left out to waste in NFL wasteland, and now all of a sudden he's leading what are they, 8-2 Vikings team? 9-2?
All the quarterbacks that have failed in New York, bring them to Minnesota, baby. Let's go. Mark Sanchez coming out of retirement. Let's go, baby.
Can you imagine, like 5 years ago, saying the quarterbacks for the Minnesota Vikings in 2024 will be Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones?
Pretty crazy. They could hire Davis Webb as like their offensive coordinator next year. Who else can you bring in? Zach Wilson can be the third quarterback. Like
Alex Tanney, quarterback coach.
Okay, I like that. All right, that's not bad. I like it.
From breathtaking cliff dives to the mega rush of free ride mountain biking, Red Bull harnessed 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to put adrenaline on display. Relying on the strength of our 5G network, Red Bull powered POV drones to deliver unmatched views while broadcasting in real time from some of the most remote locations in America. This is heart-pounding fan experiences. This is Red Bull with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
All right, 201-939-4513. Let's go to David in Michigan. David, what's up, pal?
Hey, guys. How you doing? Happy Thanksgiving.
You too, my friend.
Thanks, David.
I haven't talked to you since week 2 when I was on a ledge after the Commanders game.
I recall.
I just want to say one thing. There's a lot of chatter on FAN and social media that, you know, if the Giants lose out or they, you know, maybe scratch out one more win, that Daboll's got to go, which I think is nonsense.
Well, that's talk radio for you, David. That's to be expected.
Yeah. I just want to say I haven't played organized ball in a long time. I'm not an expert on offenses and defenses. I would never put myself in the seat of Daboll because I just don't know. I don't know the technicals of the modern game. The guy in the Giant organization that I do put I feel like I can put myself in his chair and what he might be thinking. I don't know him. I've never met him. Is John Mara. And I think, and the reason I say that, I've been a business journalist for 40 years. I've known a lot of CEOs. I've covered them. I've worked for a handful. He's already had the conversation with Daboll and Shane, saying, look, guys, you're safe next year and the year after. We're going to build something here together. If we lose out, we lose out. Find out what we need to find out about certain players. But the worst thing that happens, the fans will forget it by the time the draft rolls around, and we'll have the first or second pick, and we'll have 2 picks to play with in the first 32, 3, 4. And let's move on and make a bunch of good decisions together. That I believe that conversation has happened.
Hey, maybe, David, it's possible. That conversation maybe has happened already. Joe Shane seemed pretty confident that he was going to be back next year when he spoke a couple weeks ago. I don't know that happened or not. It might have and might not have, but I get where you're coming from on that.
So I have a question for you guys that I've been very curious about. And you guys would know much better than me.
Sure.
So, and I'm going to just take us back a little history first before I get to why I'm asking you today. When the Giants acquired Eli Manning, a lot of people almost forget, and they think they drafted him. They didn't. It was a trade.
Yeah, and they traded a lot, by the way, and there was a lot of controversy around that trade, too.
Right. So my question is this. That basically corrupted the whole idea that college players coming out of the draft do not get to choose their teams. The teams get to choose them because Archie Manning basically and Eli told the Chargers he's not playing for you. So if you draft him, trade him to one of these teams because he's not playing for the Chargers.
Now the Chargers could have called his bluff on that too, for all you know, right? I mean, who knows how long he would have taken that?
Right.
The Chargers could have called his quote unquote bluff on that if they wanted to.
Yeah, I guess I wondered why the league, and maybe they did, why the league didn't get involved and say, guys, this is not how we do it, and it's setting a terrible precedent.
Well, I mean, they might have, David. They might have, and Eli Manning would say to them, "Well, you can't make me sign a contract where I don't want to sign a contract." And then the league would say, "Okay, well then you're not playing for any other team unless they trade you." And that's how the league, with the rules in place, they kind of already step in just because of the And just to give you an example, the Kobe Bryant, right? I'll talk about the NBA real quick. Remember, he got traded on draft night from the Hornets. Right, it was Charlotte, correct, to the Lakers, right? And it was Vlade Divac was in that trade, right, going from the Lakers to the Hornets, if I recall. Afterwards, Kobe joked, this is like 10, 15 years later, he's like, yeah, I told the Hornets I wasn't going to play for him. Of course I was going to play for them. They drafted me. I wasn't going to sit out a whole year. So that's kind of the cat and mouse game that goes on between players and teams.
You know what hurts the most about that situation you just brought up?
Weren't the Nets involved in something like that too?
The New Jersey Nets were going to pick him, and he apparently told them the same thing. I'm not going to play for you. So they just like, all right, we're not going to bother.
And he later said, oh yeah, I would have played for them, right?
They didn't pick him, and the rest is history. As a Nets fan, that still kind of hurts me.
You had Kerry Kittles though. You were fine.
Yeah. The reason I bring it up is Deion Sanders, and there's this theory out in social media land and among some sports mavens, etc., that Deion Sanders is going to do a deal with Jerry Jones to coach the Cowboys next year, and his son and him and his son are going to basically make sure that he winds up on the Cowboys through the same scenario that Archie Manning and Eli Manning did.
All right, you go ahead.
I guess I just wonder, how does the NFL just let that happen? It's a corruption of the system.
David, totally. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. There are rumors out there that they'll try to control where he gets drafted, but let me just address the Cowboys part of this.
Before you even go into that, I wouldn't even call it rumors because Deion Sanders on record has expressly said it.
Yes. So fair enough. Good point. I should have been more clear. Absolutely right. The idea. This is from people that watch too much ESPN. Wilson, I'm talking to you. Happy Thanksgiving. The idea that less than 8 months after the Cowboys gave Dak Prescott the biggest contract in NFL history, that they are going to use their whatever pick it's going to be, and guess what? They might have to trade up, and they might have to trade up for him, right? Whatever it is. The resources necessary to draft Shedeur Sanders, and then after the disastrous season they've had, bring in a guy that's never coached an NFL game to pair with the son when you just paid Dak Prescott $60 million a year, might be the single dumbest thing I have ever heard in my entire life. And I've heard a lot of dumb things in my life. A lot of dumb things. I grew up in Brooklyn. I have a lot of dumb friends. Trust me. But that is such a... All right. Just imagine this, all right? Imagine this is like a Saturday Night Live skit. You got a room in Bristol, Connecticut. You got like 6 ESPN producers. All right. What do you want to talk about on, First Take today? What do you want to do? All right, well, everyone... Stephen A. likes to yell about the Cowboys. All right, so we're going to talk about the Cowboys. What other team do people like to, or players that people, Colorado. How can we combine Colorado and the Cowboys? That's how they do it. And then the next day it'll be like, it was I actually literally walked by the TV and saw this lower third once, and I don't watch these shows. It was, which team has more pressure on them this year, the Cowboys or the Lakers? It's the same thing. Let's take 2 teams that everyone wants to talk about and figure out a way to make a segment about both of them. That's all that is. It's not going to happen. If I'm wrong and this happens, feel free to call up the show and make fun of me. I will have a self-flagellation session on here for an hour if this happens, okay? You guys can come and make fun of me and kill me for an hour. It is the dumbest thing I've ever heard that's what the Cowboys are going to do after giving Dak Prescott $60 million. No chance in hell. I'm done.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's literally zero chance because the cap hit that they would take on if they were to trade Dak so soon after giving him that contract is astronomical, to a point where I don't think the Cowboys would be able to like field a full team of guys next year if they were to do that. Like, there's no way. Dak is the face of the franchise. They love Dak. He's a great guy. He's a great leader for the Cowboys.
And he's a good quarterback.
He's a good quarterback as well. I mean, look, as you said, that seems like more of a talking point by ESPN and other networks on, how can we get some more clicks today? It's a little bit of a slow news day. What can we do to get more clicks?
All it is.
Like, there's no chance. Now, as we said before, Deion Sanders has said that he will sort of try to guide where Shedeur Sanders does end up. He, again, has directly said that. So that part of it, he might attempt to, he might try, but things have changed a lot in the last 20 years. I don't know if, I feel like part of the reason why that the whole situation with Eli and Archie and him saying, I'm not playing for the Chargers, send me to New York, social media didn't really exist back then. It is a lot tougher to do anything these days without getting a humongous and significant reaction from the entire country.
And here's the other thing. They still got Phillip Rivers.
Yes, they still got
That's
one of
the
the
thing.
top,
like
the second quarterback drafted in that year.
If they weren't going to be able to get another quarterback, the Chargers might have just stood firm and said, no, we're picking you. But maybe they had Manning and Rivers like an inch apart on their board. It's like, all right, it's not worth the trouble. We're getting all these extra draft picks on top of it, plus we're getting the great quarterback that we love anyway. It makes you more willing to play ball in a situation like that. When in other situations, not so much. And other teams have to play along, right? Deion could say all he wants, I'm going to guide Shedeur to where I want him to go. Well, guess what? Other teams, again, is Shedeur Sanders going to voluntarily not play football for 2 years for a team?
No.
If they draft him and don't want to play him and ruin his career? I'd say that's probably very unlikely.
Yeah. I will say, though, not the Cowboys, but if you were to tell me that there was one other team out there that maybe there's some possibility of that situation,
Raiders,
it would be the Raiders.
What? Excuse me?
100%. Because A, they currently are one of the 3 2-win teams, along with the Giants and Jaguars. And B, I mean, we both love AP, Antonio Pierce, but given how their season's going, who knows what his future is like with that team. And honestly, Deion Sanders just makes sense as like a Raiders head coach.
And by the way, even if it's not a coach-quarterback deal, Deion and AP have a relationship from their time in L.A. AP's coached high school in L.A. for a long time and stuff like that, so they have a relationship. So even if it's not him going there to take the head coach job, Shedeur going there, something that would make sense to me.
Yeah.
When I look at how that whole thing will go down. But anyway, again, David, that wasn't me making fun of you for asking the question, because other people have brought that up to me too because of ESPN. I'm happy you did, so we had a chance to address it on the show. Thank you. Great call. Good to hear from you too, by the way. I know you always interact with us on Twitter. Always good to talk to you. Always good to interact with you. But I was holding that back for a while, and every time someone brings that up to me, like in like the production room, I have the same reaction that it just doesn't make any sense. But that's ESPN just trying to get people to click and talk about it, which mission accomplished.
Just another fantastic take from ESPN.
They are good at what they do.
Chock full of them lately.
They know what they're doing. Let's go to Cliff in New York. Cliff, what's going on, pal?
Hey, guys. I wanted to talk about the missed tackles.
Which one?
Yeah. Well, that's the point. I'd love to know which ones Dable said in his presser were not missed tackles. Because, and just like he said, there was some lack of effort, but it wasn't as extensive as people thought when they look at the tape.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was an effort issue. I don't think Dable ever said there weren't a lot of missed tackles, did he?
I think he did. He didn't say there weren't a lot of missed tackles, but
I think he was.
Some of them were missed tackles.
I think the quote was more about like the question of the team's
being effort related, not the fact that there were missed tackles.
He went back on the tape and didn't see a lack of effort.
I mean, on the post-game press conference after the game, he brought up the missed tackles right away on defense. That was the first thing he brought up when he was asked about the defensive issues.
And he also Brian Dable's never going to bring up like specific plays because that would, in a sense, be calling specific players out. And as we know, Brian Dable is just never going to do that to the media.
Understood. Well, it goes back to the Joe Shane took the opportunity in his presser to say that we had the youngest defense in the league. And so when we were talking to Jonathan on the post game last week, he said it's not so much that the game is faster, it's that when the play starts, it's faster. So that gives me some hope, because it means when you see somebody appeared to be near somebody with carrying the ball and they didn't bring him down, maybe they were there a half a second too late. And you would be too late if you didn't react fast enough to the faster unfolding of a play. I don't know if there's any metric to back up that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
No, but look, that makes sense. Look, it's not just what happens at the tackle point that impacts the guy's ability to tackle. It's getting in the right position to make the tackle, which, to your point, Cliff, goes to making the correct read and positioning yourself correctly. So, yeah, I think all that stuff is related. No question about it.
Yeah. And Shane was also asked directly at that presser, did he think he had the right guys? And that's where, and he said without hesitation, or it was asked in the negative, he said, no, I don't have the wrong guys. But that goes to my big confidence still in this regime, which is that they have direct experience with, number one, going young as the first step in improving a team that needed to be elevated from a losing team to a winning team and a sustained successful team in Buffalo. So they know who to look for, and they expect them to have to develop. So that goes back to that huddle you did with your counterpart before the 22 season, when you said what were the major themes when the turnaround started in Buffalo, and the first thing he said was they got younger. And I think the second thing was they got bigger. I don't know if we've seen that part. But it's going to take time. There was another time on this show when we asked how long does it take a cornerback to be a cornerback in the pros, and Jonathan just said years. So I'm hoping that Tay is really capable of playing in the zone, and I know that when they drafted him, they knew that was a possibility, and it didn't faze them. So overall, I've got to feel optimistic still about giving these guys a chance, and it's obviously the heat is going to be more extreme depending on if we can show anything the rest of the season. But if we didn't, it's still year one for a lot of these guys, and year two for others, and year three. So when I see a missed tackle, I'm gonna wonder, like you just said, was he anywhere near where he was supposed to be? And he was, but it was late. And in the NFL, it's a half a second is enough.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cliff. Appreciate the call, my friend. And look, that does happen though. So we'll see. 201-939-4513. All right. How do you think this game's gonna go, Matt? We can shut the phones down, Pearson. We're about at 1:30 here. Not a prediction, just the feel for it.
I mean, part of it definitely depends on who is starting at quarterback. I will say I'm a little concerned about the pass protection holding up against this pass rush of the Cowboys, considering that the Giants are down Andrew Thomas and Jermaine Illuminor. And that's nothing against Evan Neal and Chris Hubbard. It's just Micah Parsons, in my opinion. I mean, going into the season was my pick for Defensive Player of the Year. I think he's a top 3 defensive player in the NFL. And they have some other guys on that defensive front that are also very talented. So in that sense, that part, I guess, worries me a little bit. But there are ways that, the coaching staff can sort of game plan for that and strategize for that. Whoever it is under center, get the ball out quickly on passing plays. Get the ball into Malik Neighbors or Wan'Dale Robinson's hands, snap it, get it to them real quick. Then all of a sudden the pass rush isn't really as much of an issue. And if the run game starts off struggling a little bit, do some pass plays like that, because in a way, that's just an extension of the run game. If whoever's under center calls hike and immediately gets rid of it to Malik Neighbors at the line of scrimmage, that's essentially the same as running the ball. But you're getting the ball in your best playmaker's hands and letting him try to make a move and, pick up some yards. So there are definitely ways to game plan around the Cowboys pass rush and, to try to game plan around the injuries the Giants currently have. I'm more interested to see how the defense performs, honestly, because the defense has obviously been the strength of between the two sides of the ball. The defense, I would think, safe to say, has outperformed the offense for most of the season. But the unit has kind of struggled lately, and especially in last week's game against the Buccaneers. I mean, we spoke about how, or I guess I was speaking on the Giants hangout yesterday about how the first drive of the game, the Buccaneers get the ball to start the game and go on a 8+ minute drive that takes up over half of the first quarter and ends in a touchdown. And that sort of just took the energy out of the building. It seemed like it might have taken the energy a bit out of the team itself.
5 scores and 4 touchdowns in the first 6 drives. You can't have that.
Yeah, and especially with that start. I mean, if the Giants defense can come out tomorrow and force like a 3-and-out or get off the field after, 5-6 plays.
Oh my gosh, how about a takeaway?
Well, that would obviously be ideal.
Yes.
But I'm saying to start the game. I would love to see a takeaway throughout the game or two, but just get some early stops on defense, get a little bit of positive momentum on your side. And I feel like if the Giants can hang in this game and not make it be, a big deficit early on, then I don't see why the Giants can't at least have a decent shot at winning this game. I mean, the Buccaneers, despite their record going into last week, they're a good team. They're a team that has playoff aspirations and wouldn't surprise anyone if they end up going on a run to make the playoffs. The same, I don't think, can be said about this current Cowboy squad, given that Dak is out.
I agree.
It's a winnable game. I'm not saying they're going to win, but it is a game that is there for the taking.
Cowboys have not won a home game yet this year, folks.
Yeah. This game is there for the taking. I feel like the team is going to come ready to go, maybe a little bit more than what we saw on Sunday, because after what happened Sunday, no player on this team wants to see that happen again.
I think this is going to be a national coming out party for a Giants young star. And I don't think it's going to be Malik Neighbors. I think it's going to be Tyrone Tracy Jr.
I hope you're right.
I think he is a monster game, and people start talking about him and are like, oh, maybe moving on from Saquon made a little bit of sense. That's my prediction. I think low-scoring game, 21-17, 17-14, something in there. Both neither team getting well into the 20s, if that. I think that's where we'll kind of be.
On a similar note as what your prediction, I'll give one little prediction. I think Theo Johnson has a good game. I think his going into this game, his career high is 51 yards.
2 weeks ago, I think, right? Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to top that number.
Citak, happy Thanksgiving, my friend.
Happy Thanksgiving to you as well. And Pearson, happy Thanksgiving.
I have one key to the game.
What do you got?
Win the special teams battle.
Yeah, how about that? And, the Cowboys are one of the worst turnover teams in the league this year. So win on special teams, win the turnover battle, you win the football game. I'm with you, Pearson. Don't let Cavante Turpin kill you.
Happy Thanksgiving, guys.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And, guys, thank you for being with us as always. We're going to have a rapid reaction after the game, and then we're going to be off up until Monday. We're going to have our Saturday morning Big Blue Kickoff show, Marash and I, and WFAN at 7 a.m. You can check that out, too. For our whole crew, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Enjoy your holiday. Don't get too stressed out over the football. Enjoy the food. Enjoy the family. Have some fun, and we'll talk to you on Monday.
What's poppin'? Justin Jefferson here.
Football is a lot of explosion, a lot of energy and attitude.
It's a whole different vibe. With these open earbuds, it's like you're in the moment, but also you can hear everything around you. You can be involved.
To have good sound and to be so light on your ear means a lot to me. Putting that music into my ears.
You feel good enough to go out there and play.
You turn on that switch, no one can stop you.
For more, check out Bose.com.
Good sleep should come naturally, and with a new Natural Hybrid mattress, it can. A collaboration between Lisa and West Elm, the Natural Hybrid is expertly crafted from natural latex, natural wool, and certified safe foams to elevate your sleep sanctuary and support a greener tomorrow. Breathable organic cotton and moisture-wicking Joma wool consistently provide cool and comfortable slumber. Every purchase helps fuel Lisa's work with shelters and those in need. Visit lisa.com to learn more. That's LEESA.com.